So I'd like to start off with a show of hands. How many of you have ever made a small, minuscule problem that didn't really matter into something big, outlandish, something that you couldn't control? Well, I'd like to say a nice little Chinese proverb. Do not use a hatchet to remove a fly from your friend's forehead.
What?
And in a more literal sense, don't make a big problem out of something small. Where, as in the quote, you could have waved your hand in front of your friend's face or smacked him around a little bit just to mess with him, but instead you took a hatchet and killed your friend, trying to get rid of a little fly. It's not the best plan, not the greatest thing, and like I said, it makes a big, big problem out of a little speck of nothing. And to continue on this, I'd like to share a story from my past where I made a bigger problem that, in the end, affected me a lot more from something small. When I was younger, I would build lots of Lego things. I always enjoyed it, and I began building a house. It was the second day around building it, and my sister accidentally knocked it over, and parts of it fell off. It wasn't a big damage, but I was angry because I'd been working on it and she knocked it over. So I got in arguments with her, yelling back and forth, and she ended up destroying the whole house. It was all gone. I had to restart from nothing. And that made me even more angry, so we got even deeper and deeper into argument, and she ended up destroying another house. So I continued, that would be something where I could have just put the pieces that have fallen back on. From that to everything was gone. Some pieces were under the carpet, some pieces were under the couch. I had no idea what was happening. And I just continued to aggravate and made something enormous out of nothing. Continuing on that, making a bigger problem out of nothing just breaks friendships and makes even greater enemies. As a human being, you're all supposed to be somewhat able to take criticism, hardship, or any sort of dilemmas in your life. Yes, there are times where you will get angry, get overexcited, and it will make things better or maybe worse. But in the end, you always want to have to try to focus on the better things from what you can do, from what happened, than what actually will come of what the person has done to you. And that's where I'd like to end it. Thank you very much.
Well, I like the fact that you were very clear at the beginning that it's an audience survey. You transitioned well to the quote, and I thought you had a nice interpretation of the quote that you're talking about. So a solid start there. There's not really a preview of what the supporting structure is going to be. You start with a personal example, which is not a bad place to start, but I don't know that you have any idea where you're going after that. And without a plan, you're probably going to run into a little bit of a problem. And I thought through that first example, when you're talking about your sister and you fighting over the house that you were building, that kind of thing, that you did pretty well. Even though a couple of times it seemed a little repetitive, you still seemed engaged. Once you got past that story, you struggled. It was just like nothing was fluid anymore. The pacing feels very off. When you listen back to it, I think you'll notice it quite well, because you were doing fine, you were doing great, you seemed engaged, and then all of a sudden it's like, now I'm on the second point and I'm trying to think of the next thing to say, and it feels like a completely different speech. That's why you want to have a plan at the beginning, because I think I've said it a couple times, even if your second or third points are relatively short, at least if you know you're headed someplace, you get through them and it sounds like you have a purpose to what you're doing, as opposed to, I'm just struggling to find something to talk about here, which is not the impression that you want to leave us with. The delivery issues, like I said, I thought your voice was pretty solid. There's good variety. The pacing thing dropped way off in the second point. Your gestures, you got a lot of good descriptive gestures, at least in the first point. Your eye contact with the audience is pretty solid. The movements, there's a little bit of back and forth, stepping up and stepping back. Sometimes it seemed like it was connected to a point that you were making, but not always. And so I think you want to be consistent on that. And like I mentioned, I thought your anxiety level was apparent in that second section, primarily in your voice. At the end, the conclusion just felt abrupt. It was like, well, I guess that's where I want to end it. It's okay to decide that you're going to end it at a particular spot, and if you want to say, I don't know that I have much more to say about this, but let me come back to the point that I'm trying to make, which is you don't want to make a bigger problem out of something that's really small. Just kind of repeat the theme that you had at the beginning. That's probably a smoother exit, and even if you didn't have something extra to say, it sounds like you still came back to the point that you were talking about, and that's going to leave a better impression. All right, thank you.